So I've come to the conclusion that absolutely nobody on TikTok has ever had a good take. It's almost like a requirement that every month there has to be a new discourse on some random topic that draws out the absolute dumbest people on the planet to argue for the absolute worst positions. The craziest part is that many of these people hold these positions under the guise of progressivism. Eco-fascists are the prime example of this. Touting right-wing fascist agitprop under the umbrella of being environmentally conscious. So when people get on TikTok to advocate for the position that poor people shouldn't have kids, I am at a total loss for words. So this discourse has been a discourse that resurges every couple of months on TikTok, and on Twitter too actually. And we do this roundabout back and forth every time, so I want to address all the talking points and maybe, just maybe, we can finally put this topic to rest. Firstly, we have to establish what eugenics is, because that's fundamentally what we're talking about here, is eugenics. History.com defines eugenics as the practice or advocacy of improving the human species by selectively mating people with specific desirable hereditary traits. It aims to reduce human suffering by breeding out diseases, disabilities, and so-called undesirable characteristics. Early supporters of eugenics believed that people inherited things like mental illness, criminal tendencies, and even poverty, and that these conditions could be bred out of the gene pool. Now, firstly, I want to acknowledge that some of these people aren't saying that poor people have traits that need to be bred out. Some are dog whistling that for sure, but most of the people who have this take on TikTok, most of these young people, just have takes that potentially reinforce these notions, and that is still damaging within its own right. And just to be abundantly clear, I am not speaking towards abuse here. This is not a conversation about abuse. Emotional, physical, or other forms of abuse, such as purposefully not feeding your kids, is a completely different conversation and not what we are talking about when you say the terms, poor people shouldn't have kids. Okay, now that that is clear, we can finally get into the absolute craziness that these people are talking about. So firstly, we're going to start with this video.
Okay, they're having the should poor people have kids argument on Twitter again. I'm so tired of this
Beep.
shit. Y'all like, shut the fuck
Beep.
up. And you guys aren't gonna like what I have to say, but that's fine. And I don't want any smoke because I follow these people, but I do not agree with what they're saying. So saying poor people shouldn't have children is eugenics, and we can list a dozen reasons why. Y'all will still disagree. It's like talking to a wall sometimes. Okay, no. You can acknowledge the fact that it is detrimental to the life of the fucking child, which is who we're actually talking about. Fuck the parents. We're talking about the child, to be born into a life where they are not able to be provided for, okay? That fucking sucks. That's the real problem, okay? Yes, in a country where you can't be on disability with more than 2K in savings, that would mean disabled people can't have children. What percentage of Black people are disabled? Quickly. Who is more likely to be impoverished here? Why? Okay, yeah, this is all true, but so are we gonna change that overnight?
Craziness, crazy. So immediately we can see that this is an unserious person, right? Completely unserious. When we say poor people shouldn't have kids, right? When that is something that you say, you have to sit down and you have to acknowledge who is more likely to be poor in this country due to systemic factors, right? And this person's response to that is, I don't care about that because it's not going to change overnight. And this is where we get into why I believe these people are not just ignorant, but also very disingenuous. They claim they care about ending child poverty, right? That's what their position is. And they think that the best way to end child poverty is to stop poor people from having kids. Now, not even getting into the logistics of that, which would be an absolute nightmare to talk about, which would then teeter directly off the cliff into fascist territory. That's still not the best way to deal with child poverty. It's not. Fundamentally, it's not. If their position was, I want to end child poverty, no kids should live in child poverty, I'd agree with them because that's what my position is, right? That is a noble goal, no more child poverty. However, this conversation is never a conversation about ending child poverty. If this was about ending child poverty, there are solutions that people like Shaheem, people like myself, like everybody who pushes back against these talking points, have been advocating for. if we want to ensure that parents can take care of their kids and that they have enough monetary resources to do so, then why don't we ensure that employers are forced to pay people a living wage? Why don't we ensure that housing is enshrined as a human right? Why don't we ensure that there is no medical debt and no student debt, the two largest forms of debt in this country? Why can we not remove barriers that place people into poverty and keep them there? And this part makes me extraordinarily angry, where she says, F the parents. It's not about the parents. Nobody cares about the parents. It's only about the kids.
Detrimental to the life of the fucking child, which is who we're actually talking about. Fuck the parents. We're talking about the child.
Because I'm not sure if you know this, but poor kids tend to grow up to be poor adults as well. Fixing child poverty is important, but it is not the end all be all because, again, poor kids grow up to be, and I dare say again, poor adults. The people that you say you don't care about. This is not meaningfully different than the conservative take of pro-life, right? Conservative loves the posture that they care about life and the sanctity of life and life of the unborn and the life of children and all lives matter, right? But when these children are actually born, they don't care if those children die. When those children are actually born, once the children exits the womb, that child is not enshrined, a place to sleep at night. Housing is not a right for them. So the child is thrown out, whoopsie, your parents should have made more money. The children, they don't have healthcare enshrined as a right to them. There's only very few rights that conservatives acknowledge, and making sure children are taken care of are not one of them. This is that same position, except now it's not until they're born, but until they're 18 years old. That's your limit. Once they're an adult, once they're a poor adult, they don't deserve to have monetary resources provided to them if they cannot provide for themselves, especially if that is outside of their control. It's not like you're going to advocate for those poor kids who turn into poor adults because you're not advocating for those poor adults now. And this take is monumentally stupid. They're saying that having children is not a right. But my question is that if it's not a right, then who's going to police that, right? If you're saying that poor people shouldn't have kids, who is going to make poor people not have kids?
Is having kids gonna solve this problem? Like, does you saying this make the fact that having kids while you're poor is hard as fuck for the child? Does that make it any less true? No. So she's right here with me. This argument is so tired because it is. Children who literally grew up poor are telling y'all poor people should not be bringing children in this world if they are poor. Yes, because we're talking about the kids here. Again, fuck the parents, okay? First of all, I don't understand why everyone is so convinced that having kids is such a right when I don't understand. Like, how can you think that it's your right to bring harm onto someone else? That's your right? That doesn't make any fucking sense to me.
Right? Because you're not going to stop people from having kids. You're not. People have tried. You're not going to stop people from having kids. Having kids is an inevitability, right? So who's going to stop those poor people from having kids? Critically think here and give me answers. Is it the police? You're saying that the police should go into anybody who makes under the poverty line, has their kids, and take their kid away from them? The police should walk into a house where two poor people are having sex and just like shoot them both because they're breaking the rules that poor people shouldn't have kids? And even then, what is considered poor? What is the criteria for what is considered poor? Over 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Prices are continuing to rise while wages stagnate, right? Things that are outside of our control because capitalism requires there to be an underclass of people subjugated to support the billionaire class, the ruling class. So what is the line for poor? What does that mean? We seek to dismantle capitalism because we want to ensure that every person, child or not, that every person is given the resources that they need to survive, right? Food, water, shelter, healthcare. We are the richest country in the world and we can make sure that that is provided to people. But under capitalism, it requires that people work to survive because people need to work in order to keep making money for capital owners, right? Saying poor people shouldn't have kids not only is not going to stop poor people from having kids, but it's also not going to solve the problem of child poverty, because capitalism, again, requires there to be an underclass. It's built specifically to exploit workers and extract profits to the ruling class. That is something that is going to happen regardless of whether or not poor people decide to start having kids or not. You're just removing the agency of poor people, of poor working class people, to make that decision for themselves.
Like, you can acknowledge that the system is fucked up and also acknowledge that maybe it is a little selfish to just ignore the fact that the system's fucked up and then just continue to have kids. Because then what are you doing about the system? How are you going to have time to change it when you're changing diapers? Okay, thank you. Why restrict poor people from having children instead of demanding that the systems that manufacture poverty be dismantled? How's that been working? How has that been working these last fucking hundreds of years? How's it happened? Has anything been dismantled? No. Like, when are we going to have time to do all this dismantling if everyone's still popping out fucking kids? When's that going to when's that going to happen? Like, you guys are not making sense. Think about the child and not the parent, okay? Not everyone needs to have fucking kids. Maybe instead of having kids, you can, work on dismantling these systems and make it better for better generations. But in the mean fucking time, yes, it is selfish for poor people to have kids, and that's just that.
And hearing what she references the past 100 years is the absolute craziest part, because I'm not sure if you knew this, but you wouldn't be allowed to drink water in certain water fountains 100 years ago. Black people, due to systemic factors, the legacy of slavery, the systems of Jim Crow, and the current system of policing today, are more likely to be in poverty, especially so 100 years ago. So would your solution have been the same back then? Would you have told those people who lived through those eras to just not have kids, and that would have somehow fixed the issue? Because I don't think it would have. For this next section, we're going to watch a series of videos, some of which I agree with, some of which I do not, before responding to the points being made.
Overpopulation is a white supremacist eco-fascist myth, and saying that poor people don't deserve to have kids is eugenics. Let's get into it. Grab your tea. I'm having a Thai chai with vanilla. Great. I posted this video like 2 weeks ago. Parents need to make sure that they're emotionally intelligent and they have the finances, and they need to get themselves together because having children is inherently selfish. Children are a valuable part of a healthy society. And the comments were abhorrent. Just awful. Not because people disagreed. I don't really care about whether you agree with me or not, but because the people that disagreed were doing so by saying, well, poor people don't have any business having kids. Right, so eugenics is the practice of eradicating an entire people group because they have traits that are undesirable. It's the promotion of reproduction for people that do have desirable traits and telling people that have undesirable traits, you're not allowed to have kids. Just definitionally, telling poor people that they should not have kids is eugenicist. You're discouraging an entire group of people from reproduction, which is a basic human right, because they're poor. You see how there's a huge difference in saying poverty should not exist and poor people should not have the right to exist? You don't hear that? And you might be saying, well, Ismatu, we're not saying this because we don't like poor people. We're saying this because children don't deserve to be poor and in poverty. Right, that brings me to overpopulation. Bring these two arguments up together because they are often the flip sides of the same coin. It's the idea that our resources are getting used up and poor people just have so many damn kids. And if poor people stopped having so many kids, we could solve the overpopulation problem, and also they wouldn't be so poor because they wouldn't have all these kids to support. Okay, take a deep breath. Are you ready? Every single country, every single nation state that we have in the contemporary world goes through this neat little arc where they have a bunch of kids when they're establishing themselves as a country and resources are not stable. And then once they do establish themselves as a country, people have less children. This was true all across Europe. This was true in the United States. And the only reason that those countries stabilized faster was because they were the ones busy engaging in genocide, imperialism, and slavery. Not only is, well, just don't have kids if you don't have the money, deeply unfair because the people that have the least access to reproductive rights and autonomy are the impoverished. Are you certain that that's what you want to argue? People are not poor because they have too many kids. People are not poor because of happenstance. They're poor because white genocidal maniacs ravaged their homelands and created an entire underclass of people so that the rich could live in ultimate luxury all the time. If every poor person or a person under a certain income stopped having kids today by magic, poor people would still exist because the rich would just find a new class of people to exploit and make poor. That is how that works. Overpopulation is an eco-fascist myth because poor people are not the ones burning up the earth. Poor people are not the ones exploiting entire groups of people for luxury goods and services at their leisure, producing massive waste in the process. The rich are. We have enough resources for everybody on the earth. We just give most of it to the top 10%. So why do we blame impoverished parents for suffering under poverty rather than blaming the people creating the poverty in the first place? To take this to its logical extreme, right? There are entire people groups, entire nation states, entire indigenous tribes that have been here for hundreds of years chronically poor because of colonization. Look at me in my eyes and tell me that you think that those people deserve to die out because they can't get their money up. Go ahead. You are doing the work of the ruling class for them by punishing poor people and saying that they don't deserve to exist because they don't have enough money to justify their existence. Today is a great day for unlearning propaganda. Have a good one. Overpopulation is a white supremacist eco-fascist myth, and saying that poor people don't deserve to have kids is eugenics. Let's get into it.
Nobody I've ever seen argue this grew up in poverty. Not a single one. Then she goes say, well, people don't have to be emotionally intelligent to have kids. Yes, you do, because if you don't, they'll end up traumatized. Hi, I grew up on government assistance with 7 siblings, and my parents couldn't feed themselves before they had us, and they still couldn't feed us when they had us. If you can't pay your bills, why would you have children? Well, you could still have a happy, healthy childhood. You can't have a happy childhood if you're hungry. Sorry, nobody wants to hear the truth. Eugenics this, eugenics that, babes. If you can't feed yourself, you can't feed your kids.
So this really irks me because both of these videos have the same amount of likes, right? What TikTok is basically saying is that these are two equally well thought out argued points, but that's just simply not true. There are a couple of things I want to hone in on for this video. Firstly, I grew up on government assistance thing.
Hi, I grew up on government assistance with 7 siblings, and my parents couldn't feed themselves before they had us, and they still couldn't feed us when they had us.
If the government assistance that your parents received was not enough to feed you and your siblings, that means that the government assistance was trash. It was garbage. And it's true. Oftentimes, government assistance when it comes to poverty in general, or child poverty specifically, does not go nearly far enough and has not kept up with the rising cost of living. This is true, right? This is fundamentally a true statement. However, acknowledging that, you implicitly recognize that there are mechanisms in place to combat child poverty that are not literally eugenics. And instead of arguing that the system should be better funded, instead of giving our money to, the police for an ever increasing police budget, or to the military to fund imperialism, you find a way to blame poor people for suffering in a way that the system was designed to make them suffer. And also, at no point did you ever step back and analyze why your parents couldn't afford to feed themselves? Why did 2 people making 2 wages not have enough funds to afford to buy groceries for themselves? Why were they in poverty in the first place? How could we as a civilized society, as the richest country in the world, allow anybody to go hungry? These are questions that I would expect anybody who truly wanted to end hunger, especially child hunger, would be asking if they were genuine. But of course, these people aren't genuine. They're mad. They're upset that they didn't have enough to eat growing up, and rightfully so. They deserve to be angry. This anger is completely justified, but it's not being directed at the right people. This anger should be directed at the system that caused these issues to occur in the first place, but they're directing it towards their parents. I would expect these people who are now adults to understand that many parents are just trying to make it under a system that wants the worst for them. So I want to establish 2 things. Firstly, just because you experience poverty does not mean your takes are not rooted in white supremacist capitalist rhetoric. And 2, if you blame your parents for having you while being in poverty and not the system that allows poverty to exist in the first place, you don't need to be on TikTok. You need to be in therapy. You have a lot of misplaced anger towards your parents that seemingly went unaddressed until you saw somebody talking about how having children on TikTok or telling poor people not have kids is eugenics. And I mean, I get it, right? It's hard to rationalize anger at a system, at an intangible concept, at a societal construct, but you are doing the work of capitalism by placing the blame on poor parents. This is what the rich want you to do. And this is why it reaches into eugenicist territory. Many people who believe in the capitalist mindset also subscribe to the idea of a meritocracy. Rich people got to the position that they're in because they're smarter, harder working, more dedicated, and poor people are poor because they're lazy and unmotivated. So when you have the idea that poor people shouldn't have kids, whether intentionally or unintentionally, you are perpetuating the notion that poor people are lacking in certain defining traits, and because that's the case, that they shouldn't reproduce. Now, while that might not be what you believe specifically, you have to understand that you are on the same side as people who hold those beliefs seriously. How is your take meaningfully different than 18th century white supremacists who believed that black people were inherently more violent, inherently more angry, inherently more dangerous, or otherwise unfit to have kids? So they would forcibly sterilize huge numbers of black and indigenous women. And speaking of being on the same side as white supremacists, Ben Shapiro actually had a take very similar to this. The context behind this was that Ben Shapiro was arguing against free school lunch and canceling student lunch debt.
If government can protect kids from the sick radical left, shouldn't they also protect kids from hunger? Wouldn't it make sense to strengthen food stamps and have school lunch be free since some kids are in school lunch debt? Well, I mean, if you are a parent, school lunches are not going to solve the problem of child hunger at any serious level. If there is a problem of children actually starving, that is a child endangerment scenario in which CPS needs to be called. If you're talking about like actual child starvation, the truth is it does not take that much money to feed a child. I know I have 3 of them. You should be feeding your child before you feed yourself. It's that simple. There's a much deeper problem at work than school lunches if kids are legitimately starving.
Here, Ben is stating that if a child is starving, then the proper solution to that problem is to have the government come in and take that child away from their parents. The obvious conclusion to that is that child would be relocated into the foster care system. This is an interesting take from Ben Shapiro, considering that he's a big, small government, limiting government powers guy. But what Ben is saying here isn't too different than what the TikTokers we were talking about are saying as well. Instead of providing parents and families with support and resources in order to survive, you are going to take the children away from their parents in order to give them to somebody else to take care of. It's also kind of a crazy system that if your job doesn't pay you enough to survive and take care of your family, and the government refuses to help with that support, then the government will come in and take your child and will pay somebody else to take care of your child for you. Fundamentally doesn't make any sense, right? Because what you're saying is that those poor people are, again, fundamentally lacking something that would make them good parents. And it's not about, government support being wrong, because government are supporting that child anyway through the foster care system by providing money to foster homes in order to take care of the children. We understand support of that kind when we're talking about the foster care system, but when it comes to providing poor people with that support, it's so outside of the realm of possibility for people to fathom. Hi, Editing Sean here from the future. I just want to touch on this topic a little bit more because it doesn't only stop at poor people having kids. It goes further into every aspect of poor people just existing within society. For example, this tweet talking about somebody crowdfunding to get some concert tickets, and people are mad about somebody spending like $20 on a concert ticket as opposed to spending or asking people to help them pay their rent, right? And it goes down to a fundamental idea that society has about poor people, in that poor people are subhuman. Poor people are not deserving of enjoying things or having fun or going to concerts or anything of that sort. Another good example of that would be when Hassan Piker went to adopt a puppy, and he said that he was paying for the adoption fees for all 3 facilities that he went to. In the replies to some tweets, you had people saying things like this, that there are legitimate reasons for adoption fees, because if you can't afford an adoption fee, you shouldn't take care of a pet, right? And it's absolutely insane to say that, yeah, adoption fees for pets are like a barrier of entry. Like, it keeps all the dirty poors from having pets and not being able to take care of them. And this gets even worse when we get into the conversation about homeless people owning pets, right? A good example of this, and this went viral on Twitter a couple of weeks ago now, about this white lady who, I'll just show you the clip so you can see how absolutely crazy it is.
Devils say I lack empathy if you want, but if there's a choice between helping a human and helping an animal, 110% of the time I'm helping that animal, unless it's like there's children involved or like a very old person. It's a gray area over there, but like a middle-aged adult that can fend for themselves, let them fend for themselves. So I'm going to help the animal. So anyway, there are a bunch of homeless people where I live, so it's not uncommon to see them. However, there is this one man that I saw a couple months ago with a cat. And when I see people with animals that don't have houses, I immediately go into panic mode, like, are you taking good care of them? So there's this man with a cat, and I borderline stalk this man to make sure he's taking good care of his cat. So I know where he sleeps. I know where he goes every day. I know this man's pretty much every move. Anyway, I bring him cat food all the time because I want to make sure this cat's having a good life. Do I believe that this man is taking good care of his cat? Yeah, I actually do, because I was very panicked about it, and I was gonna like steal his cat if not. But he's taking really good care of his cat. He's got a great carrier for it, everything, but it keeps me up at night because every time I see this man and I talk to him and I give him cat food or things for his cats, he's progressively getting worse and worse with his, I don't know what he does, but you can tell he's on some sort of something. So my biggest fear is something will happen to this man and no one's gonna be there to take care of his cat. So anyway, it's been raining. This is what goes on in my head. I'm panicked over some man and his cat out there. So anyway, it's been raining freaking cats and dogs out there. It's freezing. And all I can think of is, how is this man's cat? How is this man's cat? Well, guess what? I saw him today because he wasn't in his usual spots because he had to be protected from this elements. Anyway, I found him. I saw him today. I go, I give him cat food. I bring him this nice big warm blanket. I'm like, please use this for your cat. You can use it for yourself too, that's fine, but please use it for the cat. You don't even let me hold you, but you don't know how lucky you have it. You could be out there fending in the rain, Mr. Sam. Oh, I cannot believe this. The internet is insane. Yesterday I made a video saying that there is a homeless man in my area with a cat, so I buy him cat food all of the time. The comment section was so negative, saying that I'm an evil monster for helping this man's cat and not helping him. Let me explain something to you. I'm just a 20-something-year-old girl, and there are thousands upon thousands of cases of homelessness in this city. I cannot save the world, but when I saw this man with the cat, yeah, I was a little concerned. This is not just like a man trying to get off his feet. This man is so far gone into his addiction that it's borderline unsafe for me to be around him, handing him the cat food. He is always tweaking so hard on something. Like, it's extreme. So no, I'm not going to give this man money. What do you want me to do? Invite him off the street into my house? I can't do anything. I can just simply give this man cat food, and in turn, that helps him so then he doesn't have to spend money or worry about feeding his cat because I did that for him that day. Like, that is my way of helping this man so then he could use his money on God knows whatever he wants to spend it on. That's on him. That's fine, but that does help somebody. I just can't believe that I was attacked for giving this man cat food. And let me explain something. There are so many resources for homelessness in this city. Soup kitchens, homeless shelters, anything. But you have to be clean to go there. And quite frankly, these people don't want to get clean, and that's their prerogative. They don't have to if they don't want to. But again, I don't think I should be ridiculed for wanting to give this man cat food. That's not a crime. And that does help him.
So what we see here and what we saw in the case with the concert tickets and what we see in the case with, adoption fees and what we see when the conversation about poor people having kids is that we see a clear dehumanization of people in poverty. Complete dehumanization. They are devoid of humanity to the same extent that somebody who is wealthy has humanity. And that there are certain rights that are enshrined for certain people who have money, but people who are lacking the opportunity in many cases due to systemic reasons don't have those same rights. And this is all a conversation about the same thing. And this is something that conservatives are very upfront about, but you will often see, liberal feminist white women doing the same thing, striding humanity to animals over that of human beings. And you see the otherwise progressive people in general doing the same thing about children, like save the children, but I don't care about the parents. It's all the same conversation, but it all denies humanity to poor people. And if we all work to address these systems that causes poverty in the first place, you wouldn't have animals that aren't being taken care of. You wouldn't have children that are starving. Because starving children is a policy failure. Fundamentally, that's really all I wanted to say in this section. It just pissed me off and it just popped into my head again when I was editing this video. So back to the video. So why do I think these people are arguing in favor of eugenics? Well, the answer, I believe, is simple. It's extraordinarily easy to place the blame on individual responsibility instead of looking at the larger systems and try to change them for the better. As Mark Fisher wrote in Capitalist Realism, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism. It's not hard to understand that some people just like the system the way it is. A lot of people feel resentment towards their parents for the position that they were in as children, and it's very easy to make a person a boogeyman as opposed to an invisible, large, overarching system. It's also important to remember that these are chronically online discourses. You are getting a biased perspective because you are not hearing from the people who actually work paycheck to paycheck to feed themselves and their kids. You're hearing from their late teens, early 20-somethings who have enough free time to be on the internet and making content about having children. We're fortunate enough to not have to work multiple jobs in order to feed our families, myself included, because I don't have any kids. So it's very easy for us to protest what poor people should and shouldn't do and take the moral high ground on this situation. But it's important to understand that children are joy. Children are hope. Under the system, there is not much hope. As a leftist, I am pro-choice and pro-reproductive freedom. In some cases, that means abortion for some people, but in others, that means people being able to make the choice to have kids as well. A lot of these takes come from a place of conservatism from people who posture as progressives. But for a lot of people, their children are their joy, their pride, and the reason why they're able to keep going under the system of capitalism that we live under. And not only should their children be taken care of, but they should be taken care of as well. There's no reason why a single person in this country should go hungry when there's billions of pounds of food that are wasted every year. There is no reason why a single person in this country should be homeless when there are millions of homes, vacant homes, in this country right now. These are issues that we can solve right now, and it's not because of a lack of resources, but you don't care about that. No, it's so much easier to point at poor people, wag your finger and state, I did my part to end child poverty. I yelled at a poor person today. If you actually want to make a difference, if you feel so strongly about the lack of resources as a kid, then write your story in a letter to your politician or something. I don't know. Volunteer at a soup kitchen, work at the Boys and Girls Club, do a food drive or something. But keep in mind that you can do that work for the rest of your life and you'll be no closer to ending child hunger than you were when you started. Because despite how important that work is, it does not address the systemic causes of that issue. But regardless, eugenics is bad. Stop trying to police what poor people do. It won't work. And your energy is better spent other places. Regardless, that's it for me. This topic drains me, and I might have been a little bit more animated this video because it makes me very mad to talk about this. So yeah, in conclusion, eugenics is bad. Blaming poor people and not the systems that made them poor is also bad. Child poverty is bad and shouldn't exist. Because all poverty is bad and shouldn't exist. And we have an excess of resources in this country that are funneled to the top because that's just how capitalism works. And the government should do more to ensure the welfare of its citizens, that being children, adults, parents, and everybody in between. So yeah, thank you to my patrons. You know what, Dixon? You almost got me. You almost got me. See, I wrote it down in the script, right? I said it when I was recording. And you would have gotten away with it too if I didn't just hear it when I'm editing this video right now. You almost got, so respect. I'm gonna let it play because I respect it. Dix Foreman Dissidents, Faye, Gizmo, Govia 2000, Jack Lee, Mango Breezy, Obrega, Alice, Guts, Kelly G. Jane, and Modus Ponus. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate you all. Look forward to another video coming in April at some point. Yeah, eugenics is bad. Rock on for no eugenics. Yeah, child poverty is bad. Rock on for no child poverty. Making sure to like and subscribe. Hit that like button. Join me again next month for another rad awesome video. Dixon, your mouth.